Chag Sameach. My name is Rabbi Josh Foster, and I serve as the Education Engagement Rabbi at B'nai Jeshurun congregation. When we think about Jews celebrating Shavuot, we are likely picturing a community that looks much like our own here in Cleveland, or perhaps a congregation in another American city. Maybe we picture people studying all night in Jerusalem and making their way to the Kotel in the wee hours of the morning. While these are wonderful images that capture Jewish life, we often fail to think about the tremendous diversity in our Jewish world. And so it is a pleasure to go on this tour with you to visit 9 distinct Jewish communities spanning all 6 inhabited continents. We begin our tour on the crossroads between Europe and Asia, in the Caucasus Mountains in Azerbaijan. Roots of the settlement of these mountain Jews can be traced to before the 5th century BCE. In fact, some historical sources identify them as descendants of the lost tribes that left Israel after the destruction of the First Temple in 586 BCE. Mountain Jews, as they are called, have certainly been living in Azerbaijan for at least 2 millennia, since Jews from Persia and possibly the Byzantine Empire were thought to have moved northeastward and settled in that region. While Jews have been living in the Caucasus Mountain region for millennia, in the early 1700s, Jews were given permission to form their own community, free from persecution, across the river from the larger city of Kuba. And their community, Krasnaya Sloboda, Red Village, likely for the many red-tiled roofs in town, flourished. Largely protected from anti-Semitism, the community peaked at 18,000 during the Soviet era. While it has dwindled to approximately 4,000 since Azerbaijan gained independence, today the village is the only entirely Jewish community outside of either Israel or the United States, and many former residents and children now living abroad come back to visit each year, bringing their wealth with them. Locals claim the main drag in town is the wealthiest kilometer in the world. The town has been referred to as the Jerusalem of the Caucasus. Residents speak Jehuri, a mixture of Persian and Hebrew. The village boasts multiple ornate synagogues, Jewish schools, cemeteries, and a new mikveh. And everything comes to a peaceful stop each week for Shabbat. Now we're going to make our way back to the United States, roughly 90 minutes outside of New York City, where our country boasts a shtetl of its own, Kiryas Joel. Kiryas Joel is named for Rabbi Joel Teitelbaum, the Satmar Hasidic Rebbe and person who spearheaded the effort to create the community. The Satmar Hasidic dynasty, founded in 1905 in Satu Mare near the Hungarian-Romanian border, migrated to New York City following World War II. As the community was growing rapidly in the Williamsburg neighborhood in Brooklyn, primarily due to high birth rates, Rabbi Teitelbaum decided to move his community to a location more secluded from secular influences. The land for the new community just outside Monroe was purchased in the early 1970s, and 14 Satmar families moved there in 1974. Today, there are nearly 30,000 residents, and the community is still rapidly growing due to high birth rates. In fact, the median age in town is 13.2 years old, making Kiryas Joel by far the youngest community in our country. The primary language in town is Yiddish, as the community works hard to maintain the very traditional Satmar Haredi practice. From Kiryas Joel, we are going to travel to the other side of the world, among the least likely places to discover Jewish community, Indonesia. Indonesia is the world's largest Muslim country, and today there is actually no synagogue in any major urban center throughout the country. And yet, On the remote island of Sulawesi, in the community of Tondano, Jews feel free to practice without fear of persecution. Sha'ar HaShamayim has been functioning since 2004, but underwent major renovations and was formally inaugurated in early 2020. Many members of the community are descendants of Dutch and Iraqi merchants who came to the region for trade, and the region is also bolstered, its Jewish community, by expats and locals who have converted. Jewish holiday programs in the community typically attract roughly 30 people. From Tondano, Indonesia, let's travel south, way south, to New Zealand. While the vast majority of New Zealand's roughly 7,000 Jews live on the North Island, where the largest cities, Auckland and Wellington, are located, Jews came to the South Island in search of gold during the gold rush there in the 1860s. And in 1863, a merchant founded the Canterbury Hebrew Congregation, holding services in his home built in Christchurch, perhaps the unlikeliest name for a city that might support a Jewish community. But indeed, Jews continued to come in search of gold, and those who settled built a beautiful synagogue building there in 1881, later establishing a kosher meat market, Jewish welfare society, social club, and more. While the 1881 synagogue was torn down roughly 100 years later in the 1980s, a new contemporary synagogue was consecrated in 1988 that serves the roughly 650 Jews who live in the community today. The next stop in our journey takes us to the middle of the jungle. We've crossed the Pacific and find ourselves in the largest city in the world, completely inaccessible by road. The only ways to get to Iquitos, Peru, surrounded by the Amazon rainforest, is by plane or by boat, located 1,200 miles from the capital city of Lima. Nonetheless, this region became a hub of businesses looking to make a fortune from the rubber boom in the area in the 1870s. Around 150 Jewish men, mainly from Morocco, made their way here, many marrying and having children with local Amazonian women. While most of the Jews left during the 1910s with the decline in the price of rubber, those who stayed and their children maintained a strong sense of Jewish identity, keeping up with Jewish traditions despite the lack of a rabbi, synagogue building, or Jewish school. In the early 2000s, Jewish leaders from abroad began visiting Iquitos and sparked renewed interest in Jewish heritage, leading to the majority of the most committed in the community to make Aliyah. And today, you can find an Amazonian Jewish community in Ramla in central Israel. A community of approximately 100 Jews remain in Iquitos today, holding Shabbat and holiday services and celebrations in their own makeshift synagogue in the back room of a mattress store. The community still uses the Jewish cemetery built in 1905. From Peru, let's make our way to Russia, but not Moscow or St. Petersburg. Believe it or not, the world's largest menorah can be found in the far reaches of Siberia, near the border with Mongolia, China, and North Korea, in the oblast of Birobidzhan. This area was established as a Jewish autonomous region in 1934, making it the first explicitly Jewish territory in modern times. The official language of the territory was Yiddish, and by 1939, 18% of the population was Jewish, and the area already boasted a Yiddish theater and Yiddish newspaper. Today, though many of the Jews who lived in the region have emigrated, and only approximately 4,000 remain here among the 75,000 in the city, the official language remains Yiddish, and Yiddish culture is still very prevalent. Street signs are in both Russian and Yiddish. A new synagogue and Jewish cultural center was opened there in 2004. You can study there at the Shalom Aleichem State University, where the main street in town is also named for the famed Yiddish language author. There is even a statue of the fiddler on the roof outside the local symphony. While the Jewish presence in Birobidzhan dates back less than 100 years, the Jews on Jerba Island in Tunisia trace their ancestry to the destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem in 586 BCE. Legend has it that some of the temple's priests who were able to escape the destruction of Jerusalem made their way to this island. In fact, the priests were said to have brought the door and some stones from the temple, which were incorporated into the El Griba synagogue on the island. While the structure of this synagogue has been rebuilt over the centuries, the El Griba synagogue has been in continuous use for over 2,000 years. It has also become a pilgrimage site for Jews from all over North Africa and North African descent on Lag BaOmer for centuries. To this day, a very high percentage of the 1,200 Jews living on the island are Kohanim, descendants of the priestly class, leading the island to be known among North African Jewry as the island of the Kohanim. There are a variety of traditions distinctive to the Jews of Jerba, such as their own unique kiddush for the Passover Seder. Across the Atlantic and to the west resides another surprising Jewish community in the tiny British territory of Gibraltar, less than 2.5 square miles. Dating back over 650 years, the Jews of Gibraltar have enjoyed a freedom and tolerance as full participants in the greater community. In the words of Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, "In the dark times of expulsion and inquisition, Gibraltar lit the beacon of tolerance. Gibraltar is probably the community where Jews have been the most integrated." Today's Jewish community numbers 750, but has been growing quickly in recent years and has had outsized influence in the territory. The local dialect spoken throughout Gibraltar, Yanito, has over 500 words of Hebrew origin, and you can't walk across the territory without spotting someone donning a kippah. Gibraltar today is home to 4 synagogues, multiple kosher restaurants, a kosher coffee house, a mikvah, and 3 Jewish schools, remarkable for a place of its size. One leader quipped recently that while there are currently 750 Jews, quote, "We've got an infrastructure that could easily cope with a community of 2,000. Shabbat is felt not only among Jews, but across all of Gibraltar, as all Jewish-owned shops have maintained the practice of closing for the day. Main Street becomes a place for family and friends to greet one another before heading off to Shabbat dinner. Largely of Sephardic Moroccan descent, the community has also established Jewish customs of its own, perhaps most notably the custom of adding actual brick shavings into their charoset for Passover. For the final leg on our journey today, we are venturing deep into the heart of Africa, not to a city, but rather to the countryside in rural Uganda, outside of the city of Mbale, over a 4 hours drive outside of the capital, Kampala. It is here where the Abu Yudaya tribe resides. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, Christian missionaries came to the area in an attempt to proselytize, with some success. Among those who converted to Protestantism was Seme Kakungulu, a tribal leader. Upon studying scripture, however, he recognized the importance of observing Moses' commandments. And upon being told that was something Jews did, not Christians, he declared, quote, "Then from this day on, I am Jewish." And by 1922, he had written a book in the local language, Luganda, detailing Jewish laws and prayers for his many supporters and followers. He chose biblical names for his children: Judah, Israel, Nimrod, Abraham, Jonah, and Miriam. And by the time he died in 1928, the Jewish tribe had 2,000 adherents. Over the decades, Jews from around the world who found themselves in Uganda helped guide the tribe in Jewish practice. Who eventually formally converted to Judaism, under the auspices of the conservative movement in the early 2000s. Visitors have helped this community, still 2,000 strong, connect to world Jewry and transform their synagogues from traditional huts to more permanent structures. The first formally trained Ugandan rabbi was ordained from the Ziegler Rabbinical School in Los Angeles in 2008. And today, in addition to being the community's rabbi, serves as the first Jewish member of parliament in the country. While 80% of the world's Jewish population lives in just two countries, Israel and the United States, more than 130 countries around the world have established Jewish communities with tremendous diversity and spanning the globe. These 9 communities we visited today are really just the tip of the iceberg. It's time to go out and explore. Chag Sameach.